what's today? It's a really special day today. Does anyone know what today is? Well done! It's a prize. If I only had a prize, I would give you one. Perhaps we could find some fine shoe wear or something to give you. But yeah, International Women's Day. So for all the women in the room, happy International Women's Day. To all the guys in the room who didn't know that, pop it in your diary for next year. And surprise all your female colleagues at work next year. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about best practice in onboarding of customers and some of the issues related around that. We've talked about quite a few of those things during the last day and a half. But I'm going to touch on a couple of new points today relating around fraud and compliance. So as some of my colleagues at work talk about, my department has been the spooks department with the fraud. But it all comes down to, I always like to go back to what are the business issues that people are really faced with? What are the things keeping them up at night? And our customers tell us these are the things. They talk about losing customers just through poor experience. And we've seen, we've all been to websites and signing up where it hasn't been a great experience and you've gone elsewhere to take your business elsewhere. It's expensive for most people who are processing things manually. Every bank and financial institution wants to drive down their costs. How do you do that when you have so many overheads with the operational areas? Compliance. Now we can't forget about those legal and compliance people. The last thing you want is AUSTRAC coming in and doing an anti-money laundering compliance check on you, do you? If you can't come up with the goods about how you've done everything correctly. And of course, how do we know that people out in branch land and call centres and wherever are doing things the right way? How do we know they're doing it in a really repeatable way, in a consistent way and method? So that fraud element really comes into play there. So you can kind of sum this all up. The thing you want to know is who are these people, how do they behave, or these customers or the prospects trying to come in the door, and how do we want to address the issues on the right there? And in particular, when it comes to things like fraud, how do we want to even protect our whole brand? The last thing you want is your institution on the front page of the Fin Review that you've been hit with something ugly that you could have indeed prevented. But at the same time, you want to make sure you get those good customers in the door quickly, get the good customer service, keep the bad customers out. So what would Veda know about this sort of stuff? Well, it's the introduction. We have information and data. So we have all sorts of data, and we have the technology then to provide the insights on that. So the data that we're talking about it's not just information on consumers and credit files. It's all the information on businesses, who are behind those businesses, who are the directors behind those businesses, what are the legal structures. We even have information on various assets. So for example, who here has ever gone and bought a used car, maybe you've bought a used car for one of your kids. And how do you really know that odometer reading is correct? And how do I know that car wasn't up to its windowsills in the Brisbane floods 2 years ago? So we have data on cars. So anyone going to buy a used car, go to the carhistory.com site and start getting some insights on that vehicle before you hand over your money on it. So our use of the data is all about connecting dots and looking for trends and patterns and then providing insights on that. So what's common to all of that, whether it be consumer data or businesses or motor vehicles? What's common? It's all about managing risk. So whether we're managing risk for the consumer or businesses like yourselves. So we work on a model of using that data to have predictability, assessing a point-in-time situation, and then managing it on an ongoing basis. And this is really critical when you are onboarding that customer, that you do want to be checking each point at that point in time. So back to our, how do we draw that into the issues around onboarding the customer? Now first and foremost, when a customer is coming to you, and this could be through any channel, could be branch, could be online, could be through a call centre, we want to see, gee, firstly, is this a real identity? Does this person actually exist? And then secondly, am I confident that the person presenting this identity to me is indeed actually that person? So it's a tricky situation, and I think this has been a challenge sometimes, for particularly an online and call centre. There has been concerns that, wow, I'm not seeing this person. How can I be confident that's that person? Well, you know what? The same issues are faced in the branches. So, you know, the 100-point checks and people phoning up with a driver's licence or a passport. Just how confident are you that all of your staff in those branches are checking those documents adequately? I have some great case studies of where they have not been, and indeed information about fake documents. So the next element is the online channel. So this is the one that people often get most nervous about. So apart from just this straight identity information about the person, you know, their name, their address, their date of birth perhaps, what else can we tell about this person? So we now have technology available where you can actually start seeing information about the device on which they are coming into your channel. And we can start doing a fraud assessment to see, does that all match up? Does it look right? Is it indeed actually a person sitting in Sydney, and there's something they're sitting in Sydney, or is it someone sitting elsewhere in the world? So this is what's known as device intelligence. So we're going to pry into a little more information. We're going to have a look at geolocations and IP addresses and font settings and language settings on their machines to make a fraud assessment to see, does all of that add up and make sense? And then lastly, you know, has there been a previous fraud incident that this person may have been linked to in some shape or form, which would be an indicator, or a high risk indicator, that this application, perhaps it's a credit application that's been made, has got some fraudulent activity sitting behind it. So you want to assess that, and I'll cover off indeed ways in which you can do that. And I know that many organisations in this room are currently using those services. So on the identity front, so you know, the world's gone on a journey with this. So you know, back with, you have the old 100-point check where you're taking a couple of documents to a branch. Then we launched on the electronic verification, or EV as it's often just shortened to. So we could actually online check a few different data sources, and over time those data sources and AML legislation has changed. So in fact, one of the big changes in 2011 was a change to the AML legislation that gave you the right to use the credit information. So when I say the credit information, I'm not talking about the credit file. It's what was known as the credit header. It's the identifying part of the file, name, address, date of birth. And indeed, we're most welcomed that AUSTRAC actually gave it the stamp of approval as being an independent and reliable source of data. So for those of you who sit awake at night reading the AML legislation, I'm sure Darian often sits there at night reading that legislation. You have to prove that those data sources you are checking when using electronic verification are independent and reliable. So this is a data source that's already got that stamp of approval. So then in 2012, we started adding in fraud assessment as part of the whole electronic verification. So rather than having many applications doing all of this, built it all into one. So where's the world heading with this? Well, the next big thing is knowledge-based authentication. So what is that? Often shortened to KBA, you might see in the documentation. So it's all about asking out-of-wallet questions about a person. So things that fraudster wouldn't know. Anyone here ever been subjected to an identity takeover or known someone who has? It's quite it can happen, and it's not pleasant when it happens. So for someone who so Nadine, right, has had an experience with identity takeover. Now, if when that person took over her identity, if they had been posed some questions about her, they probably couldn't have answered them. So things like, which of these 6 addresses, Nadine, did you live at 5 years ago? The fraudster wouldn't know that. And this is something where, again, we're able to use the wealth of data within the Veda Bureau to be able to generate these types of questions. So this is where the world is heading, to add on yet another layer of protection when using electronic verification. And where is it heading after that? Well, my belief is we're heading to biometrics. So I'm a really big advocate of voice biometrics in particular, and that's not so much for the onboarding piece, but for the returning customer. When that customer is returning to you through a call centre in particular, voice biometrics. So imagine what a great time to enrol that person in voice biometrics at the point that you have now identified them. So you don't have to go through another enrolment process, enrol and then using their voice print as the mechanism that they will use when they return to you at a later point. So that's where I think the world's going. So back to these issues on identity, and these are real things that we're seeing all the time. We particularly find that, particularly in branches and call centres, you can't get a consistent, repeated process. So branch staff are not trained in looking at, they're not trained document examiners. The quality of fake documents is outstanding. So even law enforcement agencies are constantly giving us examples to have a look at. Their guys can't even tell the difference between these documents. The quality, a lot of them coming out of China, and you can buy them in markets up in Asia. You can actually recently buy them online in Australia, fakies.com.au. Don't go there, I think site's already been taken down. The police are after them now. But the issue with the fake documents is astounding. So someone comes into a branch and is showing you those documents, you're not going back, you're just having a look at it. You're just, at best, your branch staff might look at it. You're not going back to be checking against where that document was issued. So there's no, you really need to go back to the source of issuance to be able to do a valid check. So in the old world, where you go into the branch and you're asked to fill out all the forms and then have a look at all the business rules, and then sometime later you might get a result. I recently signed up for a credit. I'm always signing up and opening accounts and checking out user experience, much like the Suncorp team looking at different applications. And I recently signed up for a credit card. My goodness, it took me 10 days to get that credit card. Now, if I had really wanted that credit card, I would have gone to another bank. And I could have got it in 24 hours. So, I'm always a believer in a picture tells 1,000 words, so we'll draw a little picture for you.
There are lots of situations where you need to be able to verify that someone is who they say they are, like opening a bank account, sending money overseas, or applying for credit. Typically, this involves printing out and filling in documents, getting them signed by a JP, and then providing 100 points of ID in a face-to-face meeting so that the identity can be verified. Whilst this has worked reasonably well in the past, it is now an outdated way of doing business. For the customer, it is an extremely time-consuming and laborious process, and as a result, many people never complete it. For business, manual verification is an inefficient and costly process that requires front-end staff, creates a large paper trail, and increases the potential for fraud. In 2007, law was passed that made it mandatory for certain businesses to verify an identity, and companies were also given the option of using electronic verification. Many businesses now offer online registration, where customers input all of their details online, believing this will complete the process. However, As this is still a manual verification process, customers find they still need to print out forms, send them in, or deliver them face to face. This is frustrating for customers, and as a result, many just give up. Well now, Veda has made the move from manual to electronic verification easy with ID Matrix. ID Matrix is an electronic identity verification service. It helps you authenticate and verify details against reliable and independent data sources, making it easier for you to verify customer details. It allows you to perform electronic identity verification 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without the need for a face-to-face meeting, and delivers real-time application approvals via the web. ID Matrix is highly configurable and provides simplified access to essential data and document sources. As there are many data sources available for self-verification, it makes it easy for customers to self-verify and delivers a superior user experience. ID Matrix satisfies strict compliance requirements for reporting entities. There is also the ability to improve match rates by including identity information from a Veda credit file with over 16 million records. But best of all, ID Matrix saves you money by reducing time and cost associated with manual verification, reducing the risk of fraud from false documentation, while increasing client conversion rates. So why verify any other way, when Veda's ID Matrix allows you to perform online verification instantly, cost-effectively and safely? So take away the hassle of verification and get your customer relationships off to a great start with ID Matrix. Verification made easy.
So that sums it up. We had fun making those drawings as well, as you can imagine. So moving this into the new world, yesterday we had a look at how that slotted into the RAM site. These are some examples of the screenshots if you were using this in your call centre. So same user forms. And some of our customers also use these web-based forms where they only have a smaller operation than something like a RAMS. Now we talked about pass rates yesterday, and this is one of the things that Nicholas raised in terms of bringing those people through and just how much success are you getting by bringing those customers through that online channel. And what can you do to improve it? And there's a number of aspects that you really need to think about. And think about what suits your organisation. So you need to understand who you're targeting, what's the age group that you're looking for, and that'll help you decide what data sources are going to be best to capture those people. You need to understand what's your appetite for risk. And this is where your legal and compliance people will come into play of what sort of rules that will determine what is a pass will they agree to. And different organisations do have a different degree of risk. You might even have different levels of rules that you want to use for different products. So the level of risk associated with a credit product, a credit card or online mortgage is going to be different to a deposit product. And you can have those separate rules. You need to think about web design, and we've seen some fantastic examples during this conference of some really good web design which helps capture clean data, really good quality data, great user experience. They're more likely to get it right. And then, of course, when it's fed through to that back end, you're going to get a higher success rate. I'm often asked, we were joking yesterday with Nicholas from RAMS about what I thought of the online forms, but I'm often asked, what's a really good example? We're about to embark on a project. How do I get it right first time? Who should I have a look at? And the first response is always, go check out RAMS. It's a really nice, clean site, easy to use, and then I'm usually asked, well, what's a bad one? And I say, no, go find them yourself. So these are some examples of varying pass rates that we get for different types of organisations. Everything from big four banks to, leasing companies, finance companies, online gaming. So they're a really big player. Online gaming companies don't have a branch to send a customer to. They have to do it all online. Money transfer, remittance companies, even telcos. So telcos are using these types of applications to prevent fraud before they hand out those smartphones. So you can see there is a variance, and it's all of these aspects on the right-hand side that feed into that, and that's why you are getting that variance. So it's a good you really need to have a good hard think about those aspects, particularly around the risk and the demographic and your web design. There's a little RAMS example again, so yeah, the one that we often point customers to. So, which brings us back to the online channel. If you think about the middle piece, so we've got the customer there now, but how can we start locking down and putting in another layer of protection around that online channel? So it's an oldie but a goodie, but you know, on that internet, no one knows you're a dog. And it's very true. So what can we do to prevent things like account takeovers? You know, the use of stolen credit cards on the web is rampant. And how can we importantly identify a returning device that's actually good? Because we certainly want to make the experience the best for those persons. So it's equally about identifying the good people as well as the bad. You might have all heard about malware. So, you know, what's these threats that are out there? You know, we have 73,000, apparently this is the stat, of new threats get released every day. So these are, you know, there are professionals working to attack sites. Just today, another huge denial of service attack is happening in the US on banks. So they've been having a really bad run of it over there since last November, quietened down a couple of weeks ago, and just today some ex-colleagues over there have said that they're getting all hammered again today, the worst they have seen. So what does this malware do? Well, here's a real-life example of something that happened at Bank of America not that long ago. So in this instance, the malware meant that there was I guess, think of it as an interception on the messaging, so the customer is there thinking they're actually on the Bank of America site, and they're not. They've actually been redirected to another site, and they're getting asked to enter in all sorts of information that if they're on a real Bank of America site, they wouldn't have been asked to enter. And then, nothing triggered in their mind. So what's happening behind the scenes here was a whole lot of extra information that the bank shouldn't, bank indeed wasn't asking for, but this was getting harvested and stored to have be the basis of some fraud activity afterwards. So these aren't made up, these are actually real life examples. So what can you do to protect this? Well, we use a product called Threat Metrics, and Ted Egan is here today from Threat Metrics if you have any questions about this particular solution for him. But we actually use the product at Veda ourselves, so we were getting hit with terrible card not present fraud back on our car history site. So the fraudsters were not testing out, they weren't trying to buy a free car history report, they were testing stolen credit cards. So fraudsters will test out those stolen credit cards on low value sites. Oh yeah, ripper, it works. Now I'm going to go in for the kill on something bigger and better. So what that meant for Veda was we were getting hit with chargebacks from the banks. And it was in the infancy of our car history business, and we couldn't afford that. It was killing us. So in this is a real example, actually. This came off our dashboard monitoring. So it looked like it was a dude sitting in Granville in New South Wales. It was actually a bad dude sitting in Romania. And this device had been, you can see at the top, presenting multiple credit cards from the same device all day long. So they were popped on the blacklist. So this technology can be used, not only in this example of detecting activity around stolen credit cards or other card not present fraud, but also to detect those malware attacks that I'm talking about. And they're going to be the ones that are going to be more applicable or more likely in your scenarios. So what else can we do to start protecting against that fraud? So this was the third element. Remember I spoke about, can we see, has this person been associated in some shape or form with a previous fraud incident. So fraudsters won't stop once. If they get away with something once, guess what? They try it again and again and again. They don't hit one organisation, they hit the multiples. And we have found they particularly hit, regional banks, the international banks. The big four do get hit, but they tend to think that the big four are going to have bigger and better solutions in place to help prevent fraud. So they'll start going after the smaller financial institutions. So the building societies, the credit unions, leasing companies, asset financing companies in particular. So what we have found with these fraudulent credit applications that we're looking at here is that looking back, for the 90% of the fraudulent applications, we went back and had a look at what did their credit information look like at that time. And guess what? 90% of them looked clean. So all looked good. All looked, happy days on the credit side. So there's a very good chance that the lender would have given them the money. But indeed, they turned out to be fraudulent activity. Again, the falsified and fake documentation is on a rise. So too is organised fraud rings. This is particularly so in the mortgage fraud area, where you're actually getting collusion between, are there any brokers in the room? No? You'll get collusion between a broker, a valuer, conveyancer, and often an accountant in the mix as well. And typically the borrower is fictitious. There is no such person. And it's the others who are cleaning up and divvying up the funds. And there's very strong belief a lot of those funds are going overseas to finance all sorts of other bad activity. So the fake documentation is not limited to things like passports or driver's licenses, but there's a huge amount of documentation around a person's income, for example. So pay slips, bank statements get dummied up. There are templates that the fraudsters can actually just go and purchase out there. So these are all the things that we get to see. The tax file notices as well. Can anyone pick the error on the passport? This is a real Sydney, yes. So that actually is a real fake passport that was lurking around the markets. But yeah, he couldn't spell Sydney right. It was a bad thing. That's right, you heard the announcement. It says that's how you must be able to see and spell it. That's right. So how do we go about helping organisations like yourself fight this fraud? Well, we believe that it can't be done on your own. You need to act as a community to solve this problem. And hence the formation of a closed group known as the Veda's Fraud Focus Group. It is a closed group, and I think it is that part that it is a closed group. Organisations then feel very comfortable with sharing a lot of information with each other. So within this group, we have it backed up with a database of fraud incidents that we can check against when other new credit applications come in. Now this database is depersonalised, so for those of you who, when you're not reading the anti-money laundering legislation, you're off reading the Privacy Act, will know all about that. So there are no names and date of births on this file, on this database. So some people then scratch their head and say, well, how on earth does it work? Well, guess what? Fraudsters actually reuse other elements. They reuse driver's license addresses, passports, in particular, and phone numbers. So they get a little bit lazy when it gets around those things, and they reuse them. And they're the elements that we're looking to see some sort of consistency of the data. So how does it work? Give me a little example. So there may have been a confirmed fraud incident. So one of the members has found this fraudulent application, and they've popped that into the database for listing. And sometime later, another applicant to a completely different organisation comes in, presents some information, does an inquiry against the database, and then we look for matches on these elements. And of course, the more matches you're getting, if you've got a match on a driver's licence, passport, and an address on the one credit application, that would be scored very high. It's a very high risk. So what this is telling you then is, gee, this is someone I just need to go look at a little bit closer. So you can imagine all the credit applications your organisation is getting each day. How do you prioritise which should I be looking at closer? It's really hard. And so this is going to help you weed out which ones, of the 100 I got, which are the 5 I should go and look at and drill into in a little more detail. It's pretty basic, but guess what, it works. Now, believe it or not, every so often you get a customer who will say, oh, I don't have any fraud. You think, well, you must be the sole financial institution out there that doesn't suffer fraud. And we encourage them to then say, well, give us a look at your bad debt book. Give us a look at your collections book. And let's see what we can find in that book. And this is a real example where we took a customer's credit inquiries over a period. So in this case, they had 45,638 inquiries, and we did a check against the database, and we found that 25 hit on that database. And you might say, well, it's only 25. But only one of those had derogatory information on their credit card file. So bad information, negative information on that credit file. The other 24 looked clean. They all looked, as I said, happy days. Credit file looks good. What was the alarming piece was when we looked at the average inquiry amount. 388 grand is the average amount. What that's pointing to is mortgage fraud. It's got mortgage fraud written all over it. So happy to say that we were able to then help that customer start looking into these cases and start to minimise the risk that they had been exposed to. For some cases it was too late. The money was gone and they were never going to recover it. But yeah, it's a real example. So as you can imagine, we can do all sorts of other analysis around this data. We can look at, across different loan portfolios, what type of fraud is occurring and when did it occur. We can start looking at trends. We can see trends across different types of customers, so different segments. So we might, take credit unions versus big four banks, for example. We also look at channels. What channel is the fraud occurring through? When we first set this up on recording channels, we actually thought it would just be all online. We thought that's going to be the primary number one. We were even ourselves, we were astounded how much was coming through the branch, which, when you start connecting that dot back to the fake documents, it's probably not much of a surprise at all. You can then start even drilling down, this is a channel code by mortgages, so you can see the online for the mortgages quite small there. Why is that? Well, still people are coming to grips with even offering mortgages online. For that one, see the broker channel, huge. A lot of fraud comes in through that channel. Now, what else can we see across the Bureau? And this is something where we're able to look at data and say, well, what's inconsistent here, and how can we help our customers identify perhaps suspects? So I don't have a team of fraud investigators back at work, but that's not our business, but data and technology and insights is. So we thought, how can we better use the data? So we thought, let's set up some mining and some patterning to look at it. So again, this is a real case. So we had an address in Carnegie down in Melbourne. It was actually for rent. That's the ad, actually. It's nice to know that it's got a large, spacious lounge room. What did we see? We saw that there were 20 different people, had presented 14 different driver's licenses, 20 different dates of birth, and 20 credit inquiries across this 10-day period in November. It's pretty sus. It's very sus. And, you know, it's a one-bedroom apartment, so that's pretty cramped living for those 20 people. I bet when we went and did a check on those driver's licenses, they were fake. So we're able to, apart from the fraud listings that our members of the fraud group are submitting, we also start doing this analysis behind the scenes. And we pop these records into, so that address was then popped in to help protect our customers. And it's flagged as a suspect. So we're not saying it's confirmed fraud, we're just saying, see this, you better, we suggest you go have a closer look. So I don't know who's living there now. I live in Melbourne, I should whiz past that place in Carnegie and have a look. Okay, so talking of legislation, what are some things that are coming up that are going to be changing the world yet again? So nothing ever stands still, does it? It doesn't stand still for long at all. And hands up those who have now got their heads right into the thick of comprehensive reporting and what it means for your organisations. One, my goodness. Does everyone actually, is everyone aware of comprehensive reporting that is coming in? So does everyone know, anyone who doesn't know what it is? A couple, okay. So in just briefly, so our current credit reporting world is in a negative world. So yes, anyone who's credit active has a credit file, but it's only negative information, apart from the inquiry that's coming in, negative information or behaviour will be recorded against that file. So, for example, if you've had a default put against you. The world is changing. In fact, Australia is one of the last countries to come on board in the OECD with this. I think it's us and France are the last two. Even New Zealand went last year. So we've just finished doing a whole big rollout of comprehensive reporting solutions to New Zealand. It's changing the world to one of positive, so it's going to change that credit reporting into a whole new range of behaviours. So you as a consumer, you're paying your bills, you're paying your credit card, you're paying your mortgage on time. All of this 24-month history of payments will now be recorded. So now you can go, when you're getting that new loan or, buying the bigger and better house and getting the new mortgage, you can go into your lender and say, well, listen, look, here's my credit score. Here's my behaviour and performance over this last 24-month period. You should give me a better rate because I'm low risk to you. So there's going to be a whole switch in terms of how consumers think about their own credit files now. How many people in this room went and got your credit file last year? I'd say probably very few. So there's going to be a whole switch in terms of interest in your own credit file. But equally for businesses, it opens up a whole lot of new opportunities. So, it will be seen to, you will be reducing debt because you'll be making better credit decisions. You'll have a different relationship with your customers, and you should be able to, if you're offering good deals, you should be able to increase the revenue is what is expected, and it has been, these benefits have been seen in other countries that have adopted this. So what's the relevance of this to identity and fraud and a discussion about onboarding customers? Well, it's really twofold. So firstly, files are going to be, credit files are going to be updated more frequently. What does that mean? Things like addresses are going to be updated more frequently. So address is a key element when identifying that person and satisfying your AML compliance. And so that will mean, better match rates, more files, more activity, better match rates, quicker onboarding, increased revenue, happy days. The other thing it is believed it will introduce is an increase in identity fraud. So if I'm a fraudster and I want to, start going and applying for some credit, probably got two ways of doing that. I could make up a fictitious ID to go do that, or I could take someone's over. Well, in the positive reporting world, if I create a fictitious one, my cat's name, Hadley Newton, is now a person instead of a cat, and I've got to then start creating a pattern of activity. I'd have to get, Hadley would go sign up for an electricity account, and then she'd have to go and sign up for a credit card. I've got to try to find a history. Much quicker to just go and take over someone's identity, right? Who you think, gee, that person had had a good credit file. So the market believes there will be an increase in identity takeover, and so hence why, putting measures in place to prevent that fraud, and before it happens, all the better. So, the solutions we've been talking about today are about preventing fraud rather than helping you with an investigation after the fact. Because that investigation after the fact is going to be very expensive for you. So I guess to sum up, what does it all mean? Well, really you could just boil it back down to these three things of, is that person who's coming in the door, is it a real identity? Is it indeed the person presenting it? Is it that person? How can we then assess for fraud? And that's using a combination of information we can get off a device as well as information we have about other past fraud incidents. Doing calculation, scoring that up, and onboarding them. And more importantly, doing all of this quickly and online. So again, it's your rules, your decisions about how you do that, but the tools are certainly there to bring those people on in that manner. So any questions? I'll now take breath. Any questions? Yes?
That situation of that address, do you guys report that to the police?
That's a very good question. So did everyone hear that? Do we report those suspicious cases to the police? No, we don't, because that one is just suspicious. So as I said, we don't have a fraud investigation team. That said, we do work with the various fraud squads. The fraud squads also provide information to us. So we get a file usually every 4 weeks, or if they have a particularly bad case in between that 4-week period, where they will share data with us, which all of our members really welcome that. Yes, Dan?
What's your speculation on the voice, the biometrics?
Voice biometrics?
Yeah, how soon?
How soon? Well, actually, yeah, it's actually available now. So Australia's been quite slow to take up voice biometrics. So there was a couple of organisations did it in the early days. NAB actually implemented a solution. It must be about 3 years ago now, and I think their timing was wrong. I think they had 2 issues. Timing was wrong. The onboarding and enrolment process was rather clumsy and expensive for the bank as well, so it didn't really take off. Centrelink also rolled out a version for a limited group of their customers also about 3 years ago, and they were probably just a little bit too early on some of the technology. It's been interesting to see there are cases looking at it now, but it's almost like you sense everyone's waiting for someone to go with the latest and greatest on it, and then there will be followers. So we certainly have done prototyping, so I wasn't going to wait and see what happened. We hooked up ID Matrix with a voice biometrics provider, and it worked a treat. So what would happen after the customer had been verified? You get the answer back yet? You're verified. Would you like to enrol in voice biometrics now? Yes. So then the mobile phone that you had entered as part of your application rings. You go through so that at that point it's getting switched over to the voice biometrics provider, and it would take you through the process to enrol. So in our prototyping, we used a method where you had to say your mobile phone 3 times. So what that was doing, it was doing 2 things. It was actually doing some voice recognition. So what is this person saying? And does that match the phone number that I just rang you on? And then it was doing the biometrics, so it was taking the voice print. And then we did a 2-way messaging, and then sent back the message, yeah, that print was good to go, the quality was good, and we've now recorded that, so the message coming back to say that's been completed. So the next time you call that bank then, rather than going through the 20 questions of prove who you are, what's your cat's name, how many pairs of black socks have you got, I don't know about you guys, but I just can't stand those phone calls. You would then just go to your voice print, and that's what's verifying you. So I think it's a matter of when, not if. Yeah.
What's put in place to counter against false positives? How are false positives handled?
Yeah, that's a good question on false positives. So what we do on that is you're wanting to have as good a quality as data as possible. So in the shared fraud database, for example, that I showed that example, apart from our suspects that are marked as a suspect, all the other records that are in there are related to an investigated, confirmed fraud event. So they're not just suspects from, gee, this guy was looking a bit shifty in the branch. It's investigated. So that really helps keep down on the false positives. You will get some. So, and then if you just got a hit on an address, for example, well, someone good might have gone and now be renting at that address. So it doesn't mean they're a bad person. So that's why the premise is you will look at how high a risk does it appear. So you want to score it up. We've also got some new developments coming this year which are looking at a real fraud score method as well as the direct hits, and that will help with the false positives as well. That's held at Veda. So for those who didn't hear the question, it was where is this database held? So it's held at Veda in the safe confines where all our credit information is also held.
Okay. So what about companies nature of any other databases? In other words, particularly in the positive credit scoring, what are the obligations of organisations to provide data to you?
Well, I guess I think there's 2 parts to that question. There's rules against comprehensive reporting and your obligation to give data. That's a very long answer to that one, but it's all about whatever you give, you only have the right to take. So if you don't give everything, you can't take all elements under comprehensive reporting. But the shared fraud database, while it sits within our technology environment, it's actually outside the realms of the Privacy Act and the changes to comprehensive reporting.
I guess what I'm curious about is how comprehensive does it achieve in terms of the total universe of information that you've got that you make good calls on.
Okay, is your question in regards to fraud or credit?
I guess
Could be both.
It's just a comprehensive nature of all of the information that you're maintaining.
Yeah, so the credit information is will be changed, so we'll have those extra 5 fields when the new world of comprehensive reporting comes in. The fields that are available in the shared fraud database, we are limited to what we can put in there, and that's because of the current Privacy Act.
I guess my question is more about the actual fraudulent fees or creditor fees that do it. How many do you know about?
Oh, how many records are sitting in the database?
Yeah. Do you know about it in terms of all the elites that are happening over the entire country?
Well, I think, so this is the only shared fraud database in Australia, just for starters. So we certainly know more than individual organisations on their own. Actually, related to the false positive, something we do there is we roll off the records after 12 months. So that helps keep down on those false positives. So, yeah, I won't disclose to you the number of records in that shared fraud database, but there are enough there that if you're not using it, you should be looking at using it. So it's like having virtual investigation teams, helping you out.